when you look back on your wedding, what's a memory you really want to have?
Yeah.
You're going to think about this day more than anyone else is going to. So
Absolutely.
what do you want to recall and remember? And instead of getting bogged down on like, okay, do we get the colored, clear cups or the colored cups, or are cupcakes good? There's too much frosting to cake ratio. Like, okay, let's think about what do you want your experience to be before we get really bogged down in the details.
All right, folks, here we are for this week's episode of The Boundless Show. This is Lisa Anderson here with you. And sorry about my voice, but I've just been ill for like 12 years, it seems. No, it's just the start of this year. It's ridiculous. So that's okay. I'm feeling okay, and I've got fun people joining me for this week's show. So, all right, here we are for our roundtable, and we're going to have a fun conversation because I know you might be saying, it's just the end of February. I'm barely getting through winter. But we're going to start talking about weddings in light of wedding season. Maybe you have to be a grandma to think that weddings are only in June or May and June, whatever. I know people are getting married all the time now, and people are getting married on Wednesdays. Y'all, this is really interesting. That said, generally people like to think towards spring and summer when they think of weddings. And so I have brought to the table here some wedding aficionados, actually 2 wedding aficionados. I have Natalie and Morgan here. Hey, ladies.
Hi.
So these ladies actually plan weddings. They have their own businesses, their own work that they've done in the wedding planning business. So that's super fun. And then I'm going to be here just being clueless and generally weird about having been in so many weddings. And I've never been married myself, but my goodness, have I attended weddings? Yeah, I have. And some of them have been great and some have been super sketch. And that said, I also have Tommy Glazier here because, Tommy, you are engaged
Yes,
and involved in planning a wedding.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
And there's a lot going on there.
Yes, there is.
Okay, so how long do we have before your wedding?
Christina and I are getting married on June 14th.
Okay, see a June wedding.
So
Very
we are
good.
counting down the days.
Okay, so you just have a few months left.
Yes,
really.
ma'am. That's
okay,
correct.
Very good. All right, well, this is going to be fun. We're going to talk about this. So you have, we just said you have a few months left. Like, where would you say what now at the, in the February time frame, what are your big things that still need to be done?
Yeah, so I think we're more on kind of the smaller things. So the details, we're still lining up an MC for kind of how all that will plan out. We have gotten fitted. We're getting the process for the groomsmen to get their suits, the process for the bridesmaids to get what they will be wearing. So that's something that we're still ironing out. The timeline for the suits is about 3 months, so we did need to get on the ball in that. But yeah, so we've begun that process. It looks like everything is going to be okay on the time frame. And I think, yeah, it's just some smaller details now that we're working out. As far as the planning, it has been majority Christina. So she'll give me option A or B, and I'll say yes. Okay. So that's something that we're talking through. But yeah, she's been great, and it's been a blessing. We're very excited to be married. Okay.
So to that point, I'd love to hear, like, when you first started talking about, because clearly you got engaged, and so that was good. You're like, good, I got past that part.
Yes,
she
ma'am.
said yes. Okay. Then let's talk about what was your first conversation around deciding what your wedding was going to look like? Mm-hmm. Did you have differing views? Was she going to be like, this is going to be a Kate Middleton blowout, a royal wedding of the century? Are we doing this small? Are we just doing it with church friends? Was there anything you had to negotiate on the front end?
Yeah, so we had kind of had this conversation a little bit before engagement. So probably, the 2 or 3 months, and the engagement was something that I was hoping to surprise her with. So I think that, occurred fairly well. But the most fun weddings that Christina and I have attended have been those that are distinctive to the bride and the groom. Mm-hmm. And so as opposed to dropping a whole bunch of money on it, the goal for us was, how do we make this wedding special to both of us, celebrating us get married? And then an additional goal that we had discussed was, let's try to celebrate those people who have really encouraged us along the way, who have really poured into us as a couple, and who have really pointed us to the Lord and encouraged us in our walk with Him. And so that became a secondary goal to that. And so for us, the whole planning really kind of had that in mind. How do we make it fun for us, celebrate us, but celebrate the people involved in kind of our relationship as well, too.
Okay.
And so that was, we were pretty much in agreement when we, began planning.
Okay, that's good. All right, so Natalie and Morgan, let's talk about this because I've seen the movie The Wedding Planner with J-Lo. I'm assuming that's exactly how you guys roll. Yes. I'm assuming, hopefully not getting your heels caught in various, in the street or whatever.
Not yet.
But that said, I realize I'm kind of curious about this. At what point do you actually get involved in the process? Because my experience with weddings have been just precious church ladies who they're going to plan the wedding because the pastor or someone in the church assigned them, and they're just looking at like, oh, are we going to put together just like some ham on buns and roll these out or whatever? So clearly there's more to it than that at this point. But at what point do you get involved, and what would you say are the biggest things that you guys have to wrangle when it comes to the process and the day of?
Yeah, it kind of just depends on the bride and groom. A lot of the times my friends or friends of friends will get engaged, and as soon as they get engaged, they say, Morgan, I know that you have worked in weddings before. Can you help? So right now I have a couple who just got engaged last weekend, and they messaged me on Instagram, and they're like, hey, we're looking at venues. Can you kind of give us some direction and some guidance? So a lot of times it's right when you get engaged. They just want someone to walk through this process with because they've probably never planned a big event like this before.
Okay.
And they know that I've done that. So it's nice to have someone walk along from the very beginning.
And just to interrupt for a second, to what extent do they have an idea in their head what they want, and how many people are just clueless or think they want something but immediately it's out of their price range, or what? How often do you have to like ratchet things in or talk people down?
Yeah, a lot of times the price is going to tell you what kind of wedding you get to have. It's really expensive. It's an awesome business to be in, but when you're looking at your friends who want to do DIY things, like that kind of pares it down quite a bit with the market these days, especially in a place like Colorado, which is a destination wedding location. So a lot of times people know right from the start what we can and can't afford, which is great. I love that they're having those conversations at the beginning, which is helpful. So most of the time they know what they can and can't afford and just want to know, what do I need to spend the most money on? What's going to be, get me the most bang for my buck type of conversations at the beginning. So
Natalie, to that point, when I talk to people who are planning a wedding, it sounds like it's just for them like another full-time job. Like they're just taking on so much. So what are the other big things that a wedding planner actually contributes to?
Yeah, it really is another full-time job. And I've had friends just absolutely kind of work themselves into the ground as they're planning weddings. So things that I found helpful that as a planner I can come alongside and help with is even the little minute details of, okay, here's your guest list. Where kind of do you guys want people to sit? And I can go and create the table chart for them. I can help with signage, kind of running through even timeline options. I just met with a bride and groom, and they didn't really know what time the sun was going to set and how they wanted to work in pictures. So we walked through 4 different timeline options together that they didn't really think they could fully customize to their day. They thought it had to be very straight and cut forward of this is what a wedding is and this is how it should go. But no, it's your day, and as planners we're here to just make it possible for them to have the wedding they want.
Okay. What do you guys find are like maybe a few of the things that couples most often either overestimate or underestimate, and you have to maybe work to start changing minds regarding because they don't know either the expense or the amount of work it'll take or the fact that it's just lame? Let's be honest. What are a few of those things?
I'd say people underestimate how long things will take. Like to your point, the groomsmen suits, they take a while. Same with dresses, same with ordering even fabric swatches. So I would say start early. Even if you think it's months in advance and you're just getting quotes and estimates from people, it's helpful to have your foot in the door to help that process speed along.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
Morgan?
totally. The most recent conversation I've had is about the timing of the reception, and we looked at it, and when the sun was going to set and when they had to leave, we had like an hour and a half. So eating dinner takes so much time, depending on how many people you have, how many caterers, are they going to serve the buffet? Are you going to have 2 buffet stations? And all that stuff that is so overwhelming to think through, like, oh, I've done this before. I can tell you how long it's going to take with 1 table of servers or 2 tables of servers and how many people and where the best place for those tables are. So, yeah, I think that just figuring out, okay, we have to eat, so we have to make time for that. How do we do that? But that's been my most recent.
I would say, now that I'm just thinking of this, I would say too, like photos, people that take none of their photos prior to the ceremony, and you're just like in this vast wasteland in between the ceremony and the reception. I am telling you, people, unless you have a comedian or water slides or something, I may not make it, between that time. So you have to be creative with like, what am I doing with my guests in the meantime?
Absolutely.
And get a good photographer that can work fast.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. I had, not too long ago, my nephew got married, and the wedding planner was super because she had the bride stay in one spot and everyone moved in and out around her. So it wasn't all this messing around with her dress and doing all the hair and stuff like that. That's good. All right, Tommy, I'm coming back to you because you had mentioned that Christina has done probably the lion's share of this from the get-go. You were giving her credit.
Yep.
That's very nice. That's kind of rude. You need to step in a little more and take some of the slack. I'm just saying, I'm going to call you out. That said, what have you found in the planning process are you super opinionated about and you want to weigh in? Like, have you surprised yourself in being like, oh my goodness, I actually do care about that? Or have you truly been mostly hands off? And then what do you think your involvement, like, is your involvement kind of what you expected? Like, what are some of the nuts and bolts of where you've really, I'm not saying this in a like negative, where you really have added value, Tommy? Let's talk about what you're actually doing. But what have you been opinionated about? What's been important?
Yeah, well, so one of the first things that I like to think I wouldn't have picked this hill to die on, but I love the color red. And so I brought that up to Christina, and she was like, well, let's see if we can do that. And so the colors are going to be burgundy and a blush rose. So I'm going to be, getting married in a burgundy suit, and then, my groomsmen are going to be in kind of a tan because it's going to be like a burgundy suit and then, a tan vest. And so that was something that was like, I guess I was really glad to have that. And probably another area of that was the amount of groomsmen, and so how many bridesmaids she had to have. And so for me, I'm very close to my family. It was very important to have all 3 of my brothers as groomsmen. And that was something that Christina was just so gracious with. She has a lot of friends, and so that was something that we rolled with. And then I guess as far as where I've added value, that's something that I have to think really hard on, and Christina might have a different answer, but I like to think that when it is something, hey, these are things that are causing me a little bit of stress. Like I get energy from this. I like planning this. I like planning this. This I don't like planning so much. Is that something that you could talk to your coworkers about? How did they do it when they got married? So whether that's, hey, bank accounts, did you guys merge that immediately? Did you keep, separate? Okay, benefits, how does that work? And so that was something where I didn't have a strong idea going in, but, was able to find hopefully some helpful information to kind of, add value and kind of push things forward.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think that people underestimate the gathering of intel and getting other people's experiences, because you could probably save yourself a lot of time and heartache by just figuring out what worked for you, learn from other people's mistakes. So to that point, let's talk about what a few of the biggest mistakes are in planning a wedding. Like, where do you find people get tripped up the most, and are they areas that are recoverable, or like what are some saves that you two, Morgan and Natalie, have had to do?
I think in most recent, I have been working with a couple, and they are really focused in on the logistics of everything, which is super cool. They want to make sure every guest is cared for and talked to, which I love that. But in that, they have focused on details first instead of, I think, overall. Tell me, like what you mentioned, okay, what do we want our experience to be? What do we want our guests' experience to be? Like, when I think of it, my question I posed to them was, when you look back on your wedding, what's a memory you really want to have?
Yeah.
And it feels kind of weird, I think, to think about that, but you're going to think about this day more than anyone else is going to. So
Absolutely.
What do you want to recall and remember? And instead of getting bogged down on like, okay, do we get the colored clear cups or the colored cups, or like, I don't know, what kind of cakes do we get? Are cupcakes good? There's too much frosting to cake ratio. Like, okay, let's think about what do you want your experience to be before we get really bogged down in the details. So it has been a little tricky to kind of refocus, and I don't know, I think it's my goal as someone who is planning and coordinating your day to help make sure I will gather the details, or I will help make that final decision with you so that your overall goal that you have to create for your day is met. I can't do that part. You are the only people who can, but I can help with all the other stuff. So that's kind of been like a hard shift, at least in recent, to, okay, just focus on the big picture and I can help with the little stuff.
Okay.
So,
and I would agree with that. I think setting that vision for what is important to you on that day is top tier. And what I've done, I'm hopefully going to be engaged any day now. We've created a spreadsheet where it is the must-haves, the would likes, the okay, indifferent, and the we couldn't care less. And that vision that we have of wanting to honor the Lord, honor the people in our lives, and be excited and just celebrate both of us, that's at the top. And then we can kind of order everything else. So you can enjoy the details in planning that. But I have had couples that get way too involved with the details as well, and they lose sight of absolutely everything else, and then they become miserable in the process. And the reality is, as a coordinator as well, stuff's gonna go wrong on the day. Those little details, chances are 3 or 4 of them aren't gonna come out right, and the bride and groom are typically the only ones that notice, maybe your parents if they were involved, but that's not what matters most. What matters is that you guys are having a good time, and that it's the vision and the picture of what you wanted.
Yeah. So to that point, what would you say are, and again, these are just kind of quick and dirty tips. What would you say is something that people should absolutely prioritize budget for, that often people don't choose to budget for, and then you're like, this is cheap and ridiculous, and you would do it differently? And what do people waste money on that you would say don't even bother, like as a category of just like no one's going to care, doesn't matter, ridiculous, whatever? What are a couple examples there?
I've seen this as a save versus splurge category that I work through as an exercise with a lot of couples. And the splurge items, I would say, are definitely venue, because that sets the scene and the stage for your entire event, and photographer, and if you want to, a videographer, because those memories are a once in a lifetime, and that's what you will look back on. The ones that you could save on, the floral industry right now is very expensive, and honestly, not a lot of your guests are going to notice if you have flowers or not. I coordinated a wedding over the summer where they really had no flowers, and it was hands down the most beautiful wedding I've been to. They did other things, and nobody even mentioned them not having flowers.
That's cool. I was in a wedding once where we carried boxes down the aisle, like colored, like someone had crafted these boxes that were kind of cool. So that was a unique, a unique idea.
I love that.
Morgan, what would you add?
Yeah, I would say maybe to splurge on food. It's the one thing that your guests are going to remember. My friends got married 8 years ago now, and we can't stop talking about the glazed carrots that we had at their wedding. They were so good. Every time their anniversary comes up, we always talk about it. So as silly as
your
that
chances
is,
of staying together are much higher with glazed carrots,
I
for sure.
agree. Yes, please. They were so good. It was like this honey glaze. Anyways, but that is one thing your guests are going to remember. Was the food delicious? Was it warm when they got it? That is something they're going to love. But yeah, with saving, I think flowers is a good one. It's an expectation to have flowers, and I love them, but it's not maybe necessary for, the whole experience. But yeah, that's off the top of my head.
Okay, that's good. So kind of as we finish here, I want to ask one other question. And Tommy, I'm going to start with you and put you on the spot. And hopefully you won't have to call out anyone by name. But I would love for us all to comment on when other people try to get their talons into your wedding and what it looks like to have hard conversations with, let's be honest, mothers-in-law, random family members and aunts and whoever else thinks that they're an expert in this. Even people that, could be friends or people that are close to you. Sometimes there can be very hurt feelings if someone's not included in a bridal party, or if something goes awry, or someone had their heart set on being the person who was going to do the playlists, and all of a sudden you tasked it to someone else. So have you had to have any of those conversations, Tommy? We'll just assume it's mostly like Christina's family that is like being the problem here. I don't know, because she's not here. So, but what is it? I mean, you have to, that can be a very delicate situation.
It can, yeah. I wouldn't say, praise the Lord. Christine and I are both, I would say, very laid back people. But yeah, there is something to be said for this is, a huge day for the bride and the groom. And so I would say there are a couple of people where it's been like, hey, this is kind of the way that we have things planned. It's like, we want to be as considerate as we can to everyone, and we are going to structure the wedding to the best that we can to accomplish that goal. At the end of the day, though, we do want to plan this to celebrate what is happening. And so that's kind of been the message that we've tried to center on. And, at the end of the day, too, we're both going to be having, members of our family who don't know the Lord. And so having that kind of, it's like, pastor is going to make sure that the gospel is proclaimed, and, having that kind of humility at the center of like, ultimately it's like, yes, this isn't, we want to glorify the Lord in how we do these things. But yeah, we have had to have a few conversations where it's like, these are the plans that we have in place. We appreciate your input. But at the end of the day, we are going to make the decision that, we believe is best as a couple, to accomplish, what we hope to accomplish. So, yeah.
I think that's good. And I think you bring up something that is very good to mention, especially for Christian couples. And that is, we think that the day is about the couple or about the ceremony, but ultimately this is a worship service.
Absolutely.
And it's a celebration of a covenant and a sacrament, and God really should be the center. I mean, we think
Absolutely.
of it as, it used to be 150, 200 years ago, people just stood up at the end of their church service and were like, who's getting married? Okay, you two, come on up here.
Yeah.
It was just very much not a thing. And now we've made it such a big, to-do.
Yes, ma'am.
And made it so expensive and stuff. But man, keeping the main thing is
Absolutely.
so great. So, all right, ladies, have you had like weird bridezilla mother-in-law situations? Other people, like people who are in tears because like my mom invited all her like pickleball ladies. No offense, Morgan loves pickleball.
I know, I love it.
And I don't want them coming to my wedding. I can't afford to have them or whatever. What have been some of the biggest trouble spots, and what would you recommend for having hard conversations?
Well, first of all, I think you worded that perfectly with how you graciously respond to family members, because the family dynamic is another thing that's very delicate throughout the process. But weddings tend to heighten any emotion that's there. That's what I've noticed. And the closer you get to the wedding, the higher that emotion gets. So my main experience with some interesting people have been the wedding day of, or rehearsal day. That's kind of when I would see a lot of moms or even aunts or grandmas kind of lose their minds and want to switch everything to how they wanted it. And they thought since the bride and groom would be too busy, they'd have the opportunity to. So that's our job as wedding planner and coordinator. We're kind of, I would say, the third person there between the bride and groom. We know their brains and we're in charge.
It's like, Mom, they're going to see that in the video.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're going to have another conversation about this. Like,
we're here to protect
even
them.
if they're a little bit, more clueless on the front end.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Morgan?
That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. Rehearsal or, day of, that's when the claws come out. Most of the time people do a great job of hiding that until the end. But I think the easiest thing is to address those issues, quote unquote, sooner rather than later. Like you said, the closer you get to the day, the bigger everything feels, the bigger of a deal everything is. So it's been fun to pull mom aside and, hold her hand and say, this is a big day. How are you feeling? So it's a privilege and an honor to get to be so close to a couple on such an important day.
Absolutely.
And so I don't take that lightly. And it's also such a big deal for your mom and your dads and, and your grandparents and your closest friends. Like, those are the people who know it's such a big deal. So it's so sweet to be able to walk alongside those people and say, hey, Dad, I noticed, here's a glass of water. Do you need a minute? Or, hey, Grandma, she's, getting ready to take a picture. Do you want to come this way? So that has been one of my favorite things about being able to walk with people as their wedding coordinator. So hopefully we can diminish those things, but I'm happy to jump in and hold someone's hand before they go nuts. So
because they all mean well, and they just want to be involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Believing
No,
the
that's so
best.
good, you guys. Well, thank you for weighing in on this. This has been really fun. And I am hopeful that those of you listening, that you're going to weigh in with your ideas. Maybe you are in the middle of some wedding planning, or you have had high hopes for a long time about what this would look like. And so find us on social, where we are having this conversation about your own tips or your own must do's or must not do's, because we would love to get that conversation going. So thank you all.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.